Hello, I ran out of time in the previous video, so I'll quickly finish up with the Outliers modified box plot. So a box plot, or a box and whisker plot, will roughly look like this, where we label the minimum, maximum, and the three quartiles. The second quartile, which is the median, and the first and third quartiles, with a box between them. Now, if there was an outlier, a number that was a lot smaller than any one of these numbers, or a number that's a lot bigger than any one of these numbers, these whiskers will extend really far to the right or really far to the left. And that can make the whole diagram a little bit funny to look at. So, outliers, we will sometimes modify the box plot so that the whiskers aren't so long when it comes to outliers. And so first of all, we have to define what an outlier even means. How do you sort of numerically decide whether or not a value is an outlier or not? And this is the rough formulation of this for a modified box plot. The IQR, the interquartile range, is the distance from Q1 to Q3, and a number is considered an outlier when it's going to be bigger than the third quartile, but how much bigger is going to stretch at least a whole length of that interquartile range, and another half of the interquartile range. So 1.5 interquartile ranges above the third quartile, or the same distance below the first quartile. So we just got an example here where we look at this would be maybe make-believe rents for places in Havre. So we found 10 apartments to rent, and here's the rent for each one. I found the first quartile, the second quartile, and the third quartile. Again, the second quartile is the median value, which will be halfway between the fifth and sixth values, so exactly in the middle. The first quartile will be here. The third quartile will be here. These I just calculated off screen very briefly. So if we were to not modify the box plot in any way, the box plot would look like the following. Maybe we'll go from 300, draw a line out here. Let's go all the way to 1,300. So halfway between will be at 800, and then halfway between that 550 and 1,050. So we've divided up our line here. Our minimum value 460 will be about here. Our first quartile is there. The second quartile is at 637. Our third quartile is at 720, and our maximum value is 1,250. So we can see that our right whisker is very long. So what we'll do instead is, once we notice this, we could begin to try to calculate, are some of these values outliers? Well, clearly this biggest value here, this 1,250, we suspect will be an outlier. So let's check. Our formula is that it should be bigger than the third quartile by 1.5 times the interquartile range. So the interquartile range is the distance between the third quartile and the first quartile. So the third quartile minus the first quartile is 720 minus 600. which is going to be 120. So this value here, I want to know, is it bigger than Q3 plus 1.5 times IQR? So Q3 plus 1.5 times IQR is going to be 720 plus 1.5 times 120. And this will be 720 plus 1.5 times 120 will be 180. And when we simplify this, we get 900. So any number bigger than 900 will be considered an outlier. 125 is certainly bigger than 900, so this is an outlier. We can also do the same to try to find outliers that are small. Q1 minus 1.5 IQR. So the first quartile is 600. And we're going to subtract 1.5 times 120. Again, 1.5, 120 is 180. And when we subtract this, we get 420. But we'll notice that there are no numbers less than 420, so there are no outliers on the left-hand side, which makes sense. The only outlier is way out here. So what we'll do instead is we'll draw that same plot. So 300, 800, 1500, and rather than connecting all of this, what I'll do is I'll take this line and we'll mark 800 is the biggest value that's not an outlier. Remember, to be an outlier, it has to be bigger than 900. So 800 is the smallest value, or sorry, is the largest value that's not an outlier. So it's right there. So what we'll do is we'll snip our whisker, we'll cut it right here, and we will still note that this value exists, but our whisker will only extend out this far. So our new box and whisker plot will look something like this. And we'll mark that we have an outlier with a little symbol out here. This is in fact what's called a modified box and whisker plot. Any outliers we mark, and the rest of the values we would draw in exactly the same way.